Does a lady tell her age? The store is a rather typical, albeit large, clapboard structure, painted red and with a rocking chair or two on the porch. There are a few white touches on the window frames and a bit of gingerbread where the steep slate roof meets the easier slope of the shingled overhang. She is not quite a painted lady, those famous Victorian houses with their excess of ornamental scalloping, furbelows, and tricolors. Yet there is little question that she is of that era. She, I humanize something I love, like some people do their cars or boats, is the homespun country cousin. It is clear from the dips in the splintery wood flooring and the rubbed shine on the door latch that this lady is no spring chicken. An old adage says a lady never tells her age, and etiquette says neither does she ask. Yet it is among the most frequently asked questions. I started this project a bit because a gentleman came at me across the counter and said he had visited the oldest country store.
That sounds like a challenge.
And it was a challenge. It was a challenge. I was sure that our little red store was older than 1881. So I, being a dyed-in-the-wool storyteller, decided that I should start telling the story of the Wayside and see what I could document about the age and history of the store.
And I gotta ask, what led you to believe that you could meet this challenge and beat it? I mean, was there something that happened in the store or some history you knew or what?
Well, I was pretty sure that the store was older, and I had kind of anecdotally known that it was about the age of our iconic covered bridge, but
Gotcha.
That was anecdotally.
Right.
So I thought that I would set about seeing what I could prove.
How did you even become involved in the Wayside? And I should say to folks out there, you and I go back a long ways.
Yes.
I was a kid and you were living up near me in Sandgate.
And your dad was the bus driver, taking our kids to school,
right.
You and our kids. Yeah.
And you also owned ChemClean, and you still do.
Right, right.
Did ChemClean start before Wayside? I guess.
Yes. ChemClean started in 1968.
Gotcha.
And we bought the Wayside in 1984. And we moved to Sandgate when we opened the ChemClean business. We bought the old Benedict garage.
Is that what that was?
That was a garage, and
Got
that
it.
had the first hydraulic lift in the state of Vermont. And we bought that, and my husband had gone to a small business show in New York City and had found out about the ChemClean process, which is
Gotcha.
is a franchised paint and varnish removal system. So that's what we did.
Now, how did you wind up in town here? Or you had relatives, so you were familiar with the area?
Yes. Doug was born, my husband Doug was born and grew up in North Bennington till he was about 14. And his uncle had purchased land
Gotcha.
in Sandgate. So Sandgate was always kind of a vacation
Right.
place, summer place for him to go.
Gotcha. And we know it's filled with thriving businesses.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so you got
exactly.
the heck out of town and you
Right.
found ChemClean, and then you found Wayside. The reason I'm bringing it back to Wayside, I know I've just veered you off terribly.
Oh,
but
that's okay. It's all part of a piece.
yeah.
But the Wayside was our go-to store when we lived in Sandgate and when
Yes.
we opened ChemClean. So every day coming in and out of Sandgate, we would go by the Wayside and we would stop in and we would buy ice cream or bandages or whatever,
Right.
pencils, whatever we needed, we would buy there. So we were very familiar with the Wayside long before we bought it.
How did you know you'd be such a good store owner? How, Nancy? Or was it just, you find out?
I think you find out.
Yeah.
You're never really sure till you get behind the counter if it's a match. But both Doug and I think we're
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be a little bit of a people person. And Doug had the business background.
Right.
And over the years, it became apparent that Helen Whitman was interested in selling the store.
Right.
And so we kind of, that kind of tripped a little, little things. Chem Clean was fine. It, paid the bills and got us to the doctor and the dentist and whatnot all. But it, I think Doug was looking for another challenge, perhaps.
And would you say that this was a far greater challenge than Chem Clean?
Very different kind of business. Very, very different.
Did it add stress to your life, Nancy?
Not initially. Because I think a lot of people initially equated it more with Doug than with me. I was caning chairs for Chem Clean.
That's right.
Caned 1,000 chairs for Chem Clean.
That's right.
And was kind of back and forth between the two. But it eventually evolved that I was as involved with it as Doug was.
So you were really making him look good. Is that what we're saying here? Take the credit. Take the credit.
Hasso, in any partnership, there's those little hills and valleys.
And how long has it been since that day when you took it over? How many years now?
37 years. And it's amazing. I kind of feel like the last 10 or 12 years particularly, I just blinked and it was gone.
Just quickly in the book, what did you try to cover?
Actually, I tried to cover a bit about our tenure there.
Right.
But also the families that owned it before us, the Whitmans and the Doyles. And I knew both of them. I knew the Whitmans, and still they're members of, Helen Whitman's children are in the valley. And I knew the Doyles a little bit. They did not own this store for a terribly long period of time.
They were the ones that triggered it as a store, though. Is that correct?
No.
Even further.
No, it's always been a store, but Doyle's changed it from the clerk-assisted sales, where the rolling ladder that still exists there, the clerk had to climb up and get a pound of nails or a box of salt or whatever. The Doyles changed it to
you pick it up yourself.
Yes.
Got it.
Self-serve.
Got it.
And I tried to incorporate a few things in the book that were happening countrywide.
Right, you're going to read a passage.
Electricity was slow to come to rural Vermont. Governor George Aiken broke ground for the first pole in the Rural Electrification Administration, REA, in Vermont in 1939. Getting power to the hills and valleys in the 30s and 40s sounds oddly like trying to get broadband internet in the 2019 and 2021. Companies were reluctant to spend the money necessary to serve sparsely populated areas. Gradually, through the efforts of President Roosevelt, the REA set out to right this wrong, and by 1950 there were few farms that did not have access, even in Vermont. Yet Smith's cash store, which is now the Wayside, had power even before the rest of the valley. Modern light, bulbs strung on a wire and operated with pull strings to turn them on and off strategically placed throughout the store, was provided by a bank of batteries on a shelf in the basement and charged by a kerosene generator.
There was something you left out of the book that I found fascinating, and it was that Arlington in the early beginnings was I don't know, like two towns.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, even now there's a distinction, very clear distinction between East Arlington or Arlington proper and Arlington proper and West Arlington. I was amazed and fascinated at how little there was documented about West Arlington. The people that lived there, certainly, there were mills along the Battenkill. There's not a lot of information about those things.
Interesting.
And I worked with Bill Budd at the Russell Collection at the Martha Canfield Library.
Yeah.
I talked to a lot of the older people that I knew that were around. And it seems that what I was feeling was absolutely true. There was a lot documented about Arlington and East Arlington, probably because the religious leaders, the bankers, and the political leaders were there, and they were more worthy of being historically documented. Whereas down in West Arlington, it tended to be the dirt farmers and the sheep ranchers and the mill people that weren't quite as worthy of documenting. I almost hate to say that because of course they were worthy, but it just wasn't done.
Right, Manchester did that too. I mean, I almost have a feeling what you're saying is that these towns have always done that. There's two groups of people. I'll say the upper class and the lower class. Right. Right, and the upper class documented, as you said, what they did in their lifetimes. And the lower class, they faded quietly away.
It just didn't seem to be as important. But it still continually surprised me that the retail establishment, the Wayside, which was the herd store back in those early days, was really very sparsely documented.
Wow, so the herds were a big name in Sandgate.
Huge.
So
huge. The house you live in, house you live in was a herd house.
So do you think the herds, could they have lived in Sandgate and actually decided to build a store on the main route?
It was a different herd.
Different herd. Okay.
There was a herd store in Sandgate, but it was a different herd.
I got you, okay.
But I think, and I say in the book, I think, I've forgotten exactly the date without checking it again, that there were 206 herds in the little cemetery above the church. It was a huge name. Yeah, a huge name.
Boy, I bet you didn't mess with the herds.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
So you're now 82 years old.
Right.
You are Wayside, and that if I were to ask, people who knew you, hey, what's one thing you could say about Nancy and Wayside? And they would say something to the effect of, she never leaves. Right? And now that you're coming towards the end of life, and no, I don't want you to go tomorrow. I am not saying that. I'm just saying as you move towards these final moments and your whole history with the store and just the fact that at some point you're going to have to step away because you won't really be needed anymore in this store, your life. And I'm not trying to make this sound hard, but how do you feel about that, and how do you deal with that?
Well, it's interesting. I do feel like the last 10 or 12 years I've blinked and it's just gone. It's gone so fast. My daughter is fond of saying, a job is what you do, not who you are. And yet when you have a business like the Wayside, where you're dealing with the public, you're part of the community, you're very visible, and you love it, it is who you are.
Yeah.
It is who you are. I'm extremely blessed that I have my daughter-in-law, Suzanne, and my granddaughter, Chelsea, who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, literally and figuratively, in terms of, the paperwork, the regulations, the scheduling, the finances, and Alan, too. So I've already backed... Doug did a lot of that. When he died, I had to pay more attention to it, but I've backed away from it. That's not the part of the store I am. I'm more the public part of the store. And the last year and few months of pretty much isolating, I could do it. I did it. I miss the store. I miss the people. I don't want what years I have left to be that isolated. I don't intend for it to be that isolated, but I'm very comfortable backing away from a lot of the things at this store, except the people. But I will back away, hopefully gracefully. I don't know that I will. I'm very, very. No, I'm very trusting.
Yeah.
In the people that are working it now. I'm not sure that their passion is quite what Doug's was, and what mine was, and we are in a different world. And the only thing that I want is for my family members to be happy, and if they choose to stay there, to be happy staying there.
Right.
And if not, they pass it on to someone who will treasure it.
So let's pretend that they were never there. This is a hypothetical.
Right.
Let's pretend they were never there, and it was just you,
Yeah.
and you decided, it's time to sell the store. Would you have been able to sell that easily? Like, what kind of a store seller would you have been, Nancy?
I don't know. I think now at 82,
get rid of it.
that would have been an easy sell.
Yeah.
I think 10 years ago it would have been a much harder sell.
Yeah.
But business is much harder now, Hasso.
But aren't you different now? Like, is Nancy a different person at 82 than she was at 70? Is there something about knowing that time has become really tight and precious that, I don't know, is there something there, Nancy?
I think you pick your battles more carefully, for one thing. I think you're very cognizant that things that seem like a big problem one day are just a moment in time.
Yeah.
That they will pass, that they will resolve, that they're just a moment in time.
Yeah.
And perhaps the Shorns owning the Wayside is just a moment in time.
Right, like the other two families before.
Right.
So then when someone's doing this history 50, 100 years from now,
right,
you're part
There'll
of a
be
long line.
the Shorn family chapter.
Leave us with one last thing. I don't know.
And there's so...
Was there food? Was there chili? What about the chili story?
Yes, I have to tell. When Hasso came in the house and was talking about doing this, I said I had always heard that a good interviewer keeps himself out of the interview. But I said to Hasso, I'm not going to keep you out of this interview, because Hasso's mother was probably one of the best friends I ever had in my life. And she worked for us briefly at the store, and she developed our chili recipe that we use to this day. And she was back in the kitchen, and she was putting in a pinch of this and a skosh of that. And I said, Bunny, you really have to write this down if we can, we can replicate it. But we're still using your mom's chili recipe to this day.
And do you think she actually wrote it down correctly?
I don't know, but we've tweaked it so that no matter who in our kitchen makes the chili, whether it's Chelsea or Suzanne or somebody else, it should come out the same. Right. Pretty doggone.
Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Hasso, thank you so much for giving me this chance to talk about the book.
I really love it.
It's been awesome. Love you too.